that we've introduced the concept of slope, we're going to have a little review worksheet here. And just a reminder, these are things that you've got to absolutely know. You're going to be talking about slope a lot in this class and then in every math class you take from now on. So slope is a fraction that describes two things. Let's make sure we're clear on these two things. The first thing it describes is how steep the line is. If you've got a big number, it's really steep. If you've got a small number, it's pretty shallow. Remember, perfectly flat would be a slope of 0. And then the second thing it describes is which direction it slants. If it's positive, so the sign of the number, if it's positive, it slopes up from left to right, kind of like this example right here. And if it's negative, it slopes down from left to right. And then there are a couple of formulas that we use to find slope. If we've got a graph like we do on these first couple of examples, we think of it as the rise over the run. And if we've got points, there's a formula that we use. So when we say we've got points, we've got two xy pairs. So here's an xy pair, and here's another xy pair. And to keep these straight, we use subscripts. So we're going to make this x1, y1. That literally just means that's the first xy pair. And this is the second xy pair, so we call that x2, y2. Again, it just means it's the second xy pair. It's just a way of keeping them straight. And then remember, it's going to be the difference in the y's, so y2 minus y1 on the top, and x2 minus x1 on the bottom. A couple of things to remember. The y's go on the top, because they correspond with the y's. That's a common mistake. People often will put the x's on the top, and that's not the way it is. So remember, it's going to be the y's on the top, and then that minus is part of the formula. A lot of times it's a good idea to write that minus in the formula before you start grabbing numbers to plug in. So on number 1, it says calculate the slope of the line on each graph and then show your work. So I'm going to zoom in on this one right here just so we can tell what's going on here. And remember, this is a graph, so we're going to use the rise over run idea. And you want to make sure that you grab a couple of convenient points. I wouldn't grab this point right in the middle here or that point right in the middle there. When we say convenient points, we mean it's got to cross at a nice convenient point on the graph, so where these lines intersect. So I'm going to grab this point right here, and I'm going to grab this point right here. You could actually grab any of these convenient points. So let me go through and point out any of them that you could grab. Any of these would be totally fine. Those all look like pretty convenient points. But again, if I can find two that are pretty close to each other, then I have to count fewer spaces, fewer boxes here. So we're going to draw a triangle. And remember, it's best to go up and down first and then right and left second. So we're going to rise first, and then we're going to run second. So we're going to rise, again, it's counting spaces, not lines. So we're going to count 1 space, 2 space, so the rise would be 2. 1 space for the run. And again, we went up and we went to the right. Both of those are positive, so that means the slope on this one is going to be 2 over 1, or just plain old 2. Now take a look. It's positive. It slopes up from left to right. And the number that represents its steepness is 2. It is pretty steep. A slope of 1 looks about like that. So that's kind of in the middle. 1 would be kind of like a perfect 45-degree angle. If it's a little bit more shallow, it's going to be a fraction that's less than 1. If it's steeper, then it's going to be a number that's bigger than 1. Okay? And of course, if we had something that went like this, perfect 45 going down from left to right, that would be a slope of -1. So just kind of keep those things in mind. Okay, let's slide down and find a different type of problem right here. Let's take a look at problem number 10. So on these problems, it says calculate the slope of a line passing through each pair of points using the slope formula and show your work. So remember, the slope formula when we've got 2 points is going to be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, as long as you're careful, these will work out just fine. Let's see. So we're going to have, this is the first xy pair, and this is the second xy pair. So y2 is going to be -3 minus, right, the minus in the formula. And again, a lot of people like putting down the minus in the middle of the top and bottom just to make sure that they don't miss it. So here's our y2 minus y1 would be -8. And then x2 is -1 minus x1, which is -8. And remember, when we have a minus minus, that's going to turn each one of those into a plus. So we're going to have -3 plus 8, that's a +5. -1 plus 8, that's going to be a +7. And we end up with that nice reduced fraction. We don't have to do anything else on that one. So there's our slope formula. And then this one, we've got the table, and it says find the slope of the line that contains the points in each table. Show your work. Now, when we practiced this before, all we had to do is grab a couple of points, check that, and then we asked you to make sure that you double checked, so you grabbed a pair of points. It doesn't say you have to do this twice. We'll assume that these come from tables that make lines on the graph. So you can just grab any 2 points you want. So I'm going to take a look at, let's take a look at number 15. You could grab this point and this point. You could grab this point and this point. It really doesn't make any difference which pair of points you grab. So I'm just going to grab, let's say we grab the small ones. So I'm going to do y2 minus y1 and x2 minus x1. Remember, this is just like calculating the rate of change that we did earlier. So again, just for review's sake, y2 minus y1, don't forget it's the y's on the top, and then x2 minus x1. So we're going to do negative 5 minus 4, and then we're going to do 1 minus 0. It's important that we do these in the same order each time. So if I did negative 5 minus 4, I've got to do 1 minus 0. So they kind of correspond, as we say. So this would be negative 9 on the top and 1 on the bottom. So we end up with negative 9. So this is a really big number, but it's negative. So this would have a huge negative slope. It would be really steep in this direction right here. Okay, now just to kind of show you what would happen if I did this in a different order. There are some people that, kind of get confused or something. I'm going to do it in this order. This is going to be 4 minus 5, and then 0 minus 1. So as long as I do it in that same corresponding order, then I'm going to be just fine. So watch what happens. I get 4 minus 5, and I get 0 minus 1. So this is a plus, so I get 9 on the top, negative 1 on the bottom, and I end up with negative 9. Now, I wouldn't recommend that. I really advise that you do it in this order, but it does work either way as long as you do it in corresponding order. What does not work is this. Okay, you want to make sure that you never do something like this. Don't do negative 5 minus 4 and then do 1 minus 0. Okay, that will not work for sure. Okay, all right, so that's a decent review of what we've done there. Go through and do these. Again, slope is really important. You've got to make sure that you have the formulas memorized and understand what it describes about the line.